Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
8:06 now. O'Connor and Company here this busy Thursday morning in Washington, the District of Columbia. Coming up in 30 minutes, Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky. My name's Larry O'Connor alongside... Oh, that's Mercedes Schlapp. Look at you.
What's up, brother? It's Thursday.
It is.
My favorite
and
day
a busy
of the
one
week.
at that.
I know.
Pretty busy on the international front as well. That's why we're happy to have KT McFarland, former Trump Deputy National Security Advisor. And where to begin? Well, first of all, this whole idea of this meeting, first of all, good morning, KT. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Glad to be with you.
So Secretary Bessent says, hey, we don't have any plans to have any talks with China. And then later in the day says, you know what, we're going to be in Switzerland. Turns out the Chinese are going to be in Switzerland. You know what, we're going to sit down. We'll have a little, dim sum. We'll have a little tea. We'll have a convo. Is that how these things happen? Or are the Chinese asking for this to be downplayed and not seem like a formal talk?
Look, the Chinese are terrified because President Trump has managed to flip the script. The whole world 2 years ago was afraid of the Chinese, afraid of antagonizing the Chinese. Now the Chinese are hat in hand. Let's have negotiations. Now, don't listen to what the Chinese are saying publicly. They're saying, oh, we're not negotiating. This is no big deal. The Chinese are in real trouble because their entire economy is based on manufacturing goods in China and selling them someplace, and most likely selling them in the United States. We're the world's largest market. We're their largest consumer of their stuff. And if they can't sell their things to the United States, their whole economy collapses. Because where are they going to sell them? They're going to maybe sell stuff in South. They're going to maybe dump their products in other countries in Southeast Asia and in Europe, making those guys angry. China needs to sell to us more than we need to buy from them. And that is the case with every country we're renegotiating with. But it is most certainly the case with China. Just remember, they need to sell to us more than we need to buy from them. And that gives us enormous leverage. And China, if they're watching the U.S.-UK trade deal, which is likely to be signed soon and announced today, the Chinese have to be really worried because that means America is going to have trade deals with everybody else, and maybe China eventually, never. The Chinese, if they don't produce stuff, they have unemployed factory workers who are going to start marching on Beijing.
KT, let me ask you about this trade deal with the United Kingdom. It looks like it's going to be, as you mentioned, the first of many. But, how quickly can we start seeing additional trade agreements? I think, does this then now kind of spark the trade agreement movement this summer, which I think so many in Wall Street are anticipating?
Yeah, and it's the symbolism of the U.S.-UK trade deal, it's the first one. Today happens to be the 80th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day. So it's when the United States and Britain, more or less alone, defeated Nazi Germany. And so the symbolism couldn't be more important, and the substance of it couldn't be more important. In the first Trump term, we got very close to a trade agreement with the Brits. The sticking points were things like American agricultural products, American beef that the Brits didn't want to import, but there were remaining issues, but mostly because of their politics, because of the Democrats' impeachment efforts against President Trump. It never got done. And so today, a lot of those issues have been dealt with. The new issues are over technology and tech companies, and those seem to be dealt with. But if we can do one with Great Britain, the immediate economic impact is going to be huge on both countries, on the stock market. And then every other country is going to say, wait a minute, we don't want to be the last ones to make a trade deal with America.
KT McFarland is our guest. KT, Joe Biden gave an exclusive one-on-one interview with the BBC, a foreign news agency that was broadcast in a foreign country, Europe, in the continent of Europe, of course. And during that interview, he accused his successor, President Trump, just 107 days into his presidency, he accused him of appeasement when it comes to Putin, Russia, Ukraine. Can you recall ever a former president using this kind of platform to accuse his successor of appeasement while war is breaking out? Not to mention the fact that the BBC interviewer never pointed out that it was under Biden and Obama's watch that all of this Russian aggression took place.
What President Biden, well, who knows what he thinks, but the invasion of Ukraine never would have happened if President Trump had been president. Why? Because, first of all, the Russians would have been afraid to do it. And secondly, they wouldn't have had the money to do it. Because of Biden's energy policies, because of Obama's energy policies, the Russians had a lot of money, extra money floating around that they could invade their neighbors. When Trump was president the first time, and now again, they didn't have that extra money because oil prices were low.
Right.
President Trump's energy policies pushed the price of oil down. Russia's main source of income is oil export revenues. They didn't have them. They had sanctions against them, and even the stuff they could smuggle out of Russia, they had to sell at a low price. So Russia never had the money. So remember, why are we in this mess? It's because of Joe Biden. And when President Trump is squeezing both countries, my guess is the Russians are now watching the world situation. They're watching Trump go to the Middle East. They're watching Trump have a trade deal. A success breeds. It doesn't wear down your political capital. It adds to your political capital. And the fact that the Ukraine and the U.S. have signed a rare earth minerals development deal, which is going to take 30 years to develop. So the U.S. and Ukraine's economies are tied together for 30 years. I think the Russians have got to look at that and say, handwriting's on the wall.
Yeah, I hear you on all that. Mercedes, I find it so unseemly and despicable for this. He's a despicable man, Joe Biden. He always has been. And for him just 100 days in to then publicly wasn't on foreign soil, but it's broadcast on foreign soil.
Yeah, but
to accuse Donald Trump of appeasement is...
Well, and the other piece of this is normally, as KT knows, former presidents normally do not criticize current presidents.
Right.
They usually just go away in the shadow and not engage.
Well,
and for Joe
to be
Biden
fair,
to
Trump,
come out,
Trump may be an exception to that rule too. When he was
but he was also running for re-election as well, so it's a little different. But in the case of Joe Biden, for them to say, okay, here are your pills, Joe Biden, go out on this interview because Dr. Jill Biden thought it was a good idea after he literally abandoned our foreign policy, created such chaos in the world that, of course, now we see the intensifying of this war. But this brings a bigger question, KT. The president has called for peace. He's trying to get this deal done in Russia and Ukraine, and no one is budging. No one is moving. And it's just, I think, it must be incredibly frustrating.
It's frustrating for sure. But President Trump has a lot of weapons or economic weapons he can still use and employ against Russia, like secondary sanctions. The price of oil is going down as we speak. That's cutting into Russia's revenues. Russia's, I think, going to be increasingly isolated. They'll, whether it's today, tomorrow, 6 months from now, they'll have to do a deal. And by the way, you know what Joe Biden's big legacy is going to be? He's going to be the hyphen, 46, 45, 47, right?
Yeah.
And what's Joe Biden? He's a hyphen between 45 and 47.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, that's not a good place to be.
A great, non-entity kind of punctuation for him. KT, thank you for joining us on a busy day.
Honor and a pleasure. Thank you.